Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And oh my gosh, we are going to have an incredible discussion today because we're going to be talking about being creative rebellion, authenticity, all of these things that are in the news, in the media, on the socials, really a lot. But it's very important for all of us to be thinking about these topics. And so please join me in welcoming John Couch to our program today. Welcome, John. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Deb.
Great.
Nice to be here.
Great. Well, I should have turned on the recording before as we were doing our initial chat. Those are always the best moments, right? But let me tell people just a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into this. So John Couch is a visionary multi-hyphenate who straddles the intersection of writing, art, design, and technology. His book, The Art of Creative Rebellion, encapsulates his professional and life philosophy to unleash the creative potential of all people as the world needs curiosity and courage more now than ever. John is the head of Galvanize Studios, which most recently engaged with Amazon Prime Video, helping the product design team to envision the future of the experience. Prior to this, Galvanize Studios worked with Versus.ai on their product vision, video, and strategy. John was formerly Chief Experience Officer of Blockchain Creative Labs, a Fox company, and the former VP of Product Design at Hulu. Oh my gosh, that's quite the pedigree. So again, John, welcome to our program.
Thank you. I'll make one small correction.
Okay.
I go by John S. Couch.
Okay.
The only reason why I have an S is there's a famous John Couch at Apple who started with Steve Jobs.
That's true. That is true.
And I often get his emails. So
that could be interesting.
It is. One time I got an email from Simon Sinek who thought he was talking to the other John Couch.
Oh, how fun is that?
Kind of interesting, like, an unusual name like Couch, and we end up like having the same first name as well. So
I love it. Yep. We'll make sure that in the title I add the S so that we are good with that. But I briefly mentioned a little bit about your background, but tell us more about how it is that you got to where you are today.
It's interesting because my original degree was in art and I did design as well.
Okay.
And I think I had this interesting combination that my dad was a PhD biologist and my mother was an artist.
Okay. So he was very analytical.
Yes. And my mother was more of the creative, spirit of the group. And so I think in some ways I was an amalgamation of those two things. And so design, when I ended up leaving college, became a thing that I could do and apply. Pretty much starting with marketing and brand design, learning how to do visual design, because UX design really didn't exist back in the 90s. And it was only in the 90s that with the advent, of the internet and the web browser, that suddenly people realized that the interaction with this screen had to be thought of very differently. And like all things that tend to happen, they looked at the past in order to figure out the present. So first web pages were like magazines. I mean, they're literally like these things that flipped and turned over, and because this is what people knew. And ultimately, what happened is you realize, no, you need a different language, a visual language for that. So I started working on that. I worked at Wired magazine back then, and then I moved from that to doing a startup, did the whole raising money thing. Ultimately moved to Los Angeles in 2000. because my wife is here, and I decided to, between love and money, I can always make more money.
This is true. And
Right.
wife always wins.
Yes. And when I moved down to LA, it was kind of prescient, people thought, because the dot bomb happened soon after.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an interesting time to be in Los Angeles, which is very much a town of Hollywood and
Mm-hmm.
industry, very different than Silicon Valley.
Mm-hmm.
But I was lucky enough to become VP of Interactive at
Mm-hmm.
CBS and CBS.com, which was a very analog company at the
Mm-hmm.
time. But there was a show that was really big called Survivor,
Mm.
and people started to get into this feeling of like connecting to a TV show in real
Right.
time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it was, even though the show had been shot 6 months prior,
Mm-hmm.
there was a feeling of it happening in real time. And
Right.
so that built community.
Mm-hmm.
And then so for the first time, you really had the ability to have fandom,
Mm-hmm.
which wasn't just, your friends around the water cooler
Mm-hmm.
talking about it, but you could go online
Mm-hmm.
and actually talk and interact directly with the product and
Right.
the IP.
Mm-hmm.
So that became an interesting experience for me
Mm-hmm.
to learn about like, well, storytelling
Mm-hmm.
within this new environment. There's a
Mm-hmm.
linear storytelling of broadcast,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's a way of putting that story into a different medium, which was the
Mm-hmm.
internet at the time in the mid 2000s, and then building community around that. So to
Mm-hmm.
answer your question, I kind of moved with the times,
Mm-hmm.
and then ultimately became more interested in storytelling and how it can be expressed in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
That ultimately led me to, my biggest career job, full time, was Hulu,
Mm-hmm.
because that was a complete rethinking and redesigning of the entire platform
Mm-hmm.
and the experience, integrating live TV, which is very different than on-demand
Right.
TV,
Mm-hmm.
and also thinking about the marketing and branding and the whole, how does a human
Mm-hmm.
being interact with us? So that was how I got to where I am. And then ultimately I started consulting after that because I enjoyed
Mm-hmm.
working with multiple
Mm-hmm.
companies. And that's where Galvanized
Mm-hmm.
Studios, my consultancy, comes in, to work with different companies, oftentimes streaming, but recently it's been AI,
Mm-hmm.
and then also crypto. Just
Right.
because what's interesting to me is like, what are the new technologies and
Mm-hmm.
how can I have a continuous growth
Mm-hmm.
mindset,
Mm-hmm.
which I think everybody should have,
Mm-hmm.
even if you don't like the idea of like having to learn a new technology,
Mm-hmm.
just do a little bit because you'll
Mm-hmm.
find yourself like doing a little bit every day, and then ultimately
Right.
you'll find yourself getting into it.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
because when the internet came out, I remember the immediate reaction to the internet was like, "Ooh, I don't know if I like this."
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
and that's
Mm-hmm.
generally the reaction that people
Mm-hmm.
have is either you have the people who are like running right toward it
Mm-hmm.
and going like, "Oh, this is new. I want to see
Mm-hmm.
what I can do." And then you have the majority of people who are a little bit like, "I'm not sure about
Mm-hmm.
this." I'm gonna give a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of it. But what I've found is that if you do jump into it even a
Mm-hmm.
little bit, and you don't have to know coding, you can just
Mm-hmm.
know what you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
do, whether it's the internet, whether it's apps on the iPhone
Mm-hmm.
when it came out, and now with AI,
Mm-hmm.
it's a tool. So
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, it's an
Right.
expression
Mm-hmm.
of you, and
Mm-hmm.
that's how I
Mm-hmm.
have built my career through curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Like if something kind of disturbs me, that means
Mm-hmm.
I'm generally going to look into it
Mm-hmm.
because that is a signal to me that there's
Mm-hmm.
something there that I need to look at.
Right. Right. And technology has, it made leaps and bounds, especially recently. And I think a big part of that was because of COVID. People
Yeah.
just, we did all sorts of things. But, growing up, we had three television channels. Three.
Mm. Yes.
And one of them was actually a combination of ABC and CBS. I never, couldn't do that now.
Mm.
But and 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 I never touched a computer till I was in college. Now I know I'm giving away my age here, but then to see how things changed and really actually pretty rapidly. But as you said, people, they're always like, wait a minute.
Hmm.
But you go back and you think, okay, the assembly line. Well, people said no. We're going to lose we're going to lose the quality of things when it's just mass produced. The typewriter, right? And then you switch from the typewriter to the computer. Holy schmoly. And all of those things. And you always have those who are sign me up, sign me up. I want to be a beta tester. I want to do, all of those things. And then the others that might kind of go along kicking and screaming the entire way. And then
Hmm.
it's funny because a lot of times those people are the people who love it the most once they finally learn what it is.
Sure. And I think the other thing that happens with these technological
Mm-hmm.
revolutions is a disruption of your job.
Right.
And that's a very primal thing because suddenly you feel like, well, survival, like how's this going to affect my
Right.
family and
hmm
my life?
hmm
And we're in that point right now. So what happened, when the horse and buggy
hmm
industry
hmm
was severely disrupted by the introduction of the
Right.
automobile.
hmm
And then when Henry Ford came
hmm
out, and built the assembly line you're
hmm
referring
hmm
to, it completely changed things.
hmm
Now, what happened to the people who did the crafting of the buggy and the
Right.
wheels?
hmm
And that whole industry had to
hmm
be
The
retrained.
furriers, right? The people
Right.
who did
There's a
horseshoes. Yeah,
lot
all of
of
that.
different people,
hmm
that were involved with that. And suddenly you had those skills that were no
hmm
longer viable.
hmm
But what I have found, though, it's interesting, is that it doesn't ever totally go away because you'll
Right.
find a lot of people who can still do the crafting. They just
hmm
can't do it at scale the way it
Right.
was. So I think the same thing is happening,
hmm
within the idea of
hmm
technology now.
hmm
That ultimately, it's been said many times, but AI won't replace you, but it'll replace people who don't know how to use AI. And by
Right.
that, it doesn't mean you have to go into a
hmm
command prompt and
hmm
start to code yourself. You just have to
hmm
understand like how these things work,
hmm
how to pull them together.
hmm
And what it's interesting is that in the same way that the internet
hmm
allowed you to have an idea and deploy it.
hmm
I have an idea of having the world's biggest bookstore, and
hmm
then ultimately, look what happens.
Right.
You
Yeah.
grow.
It was in my
Yeah,
garage and now let's make it bigger.
exactly. So you can do that at an accelerated rate
hmm
now. So the question ultimately is like, is this going to be one of those, it's exponentially
hmm
growth situation right now, but
hmm
at some point it's going to taper off.
Right.
In the same
Right.
way that there was exponential growth of apps on the iPhone
hmm
initially, like there's an
hmm
app for that. I mean, literally,
Yeah. Everything. I mean,
right?
like I know Joel Calm, who he created an app that farts.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So you have a lot of AI apps that
hmm
fart, so to
Right.
speak. So I think that's going to calm
hmm
down. And then in the
hmm
same way that when I was starting at Hulu in
hmm
2016,
hmm
there was a explosion of streaming
hmm
services that
Right.
started to happen
hmm
to compete with the main ones. But
hmm
ultimately, what do we have now? Ultimately, we have essentially
It's down
Netflix,
to about 5.
Amazon Prime
hmm
Video,
hmm
Hulu is now part of Disney Plus
hmm
ultimately, and YouTube
hmm
really has become a
hmm
huge
Right.
contender in the
hmm
space.
hmm
So you have the paradox of choice,
hmm
so that at some point you have this explosion of
hmm
activity, then you start to see this kind of
hmm
consolidation. Because if you look at AI programs,
hmm
not to be just talking about AI, but it's
hmm
obviously a thing that's happening right
hmm
now. Really, there's about 4 or 5 that people are using the
hmm
most.
Right.
ChatGPT,
hmm
Perplexity, Claude, Gemini.
Right.
There's a handful that
hmm
really are the
hmm
top ones that
hmm
people use, and then there's a bunch of like specialized ones, which
hmm
are sometimes just white
hmm
labeling the
hmm
technology, putting into
hmm
different use. But ultimately, I think it's going to be interesting to see that AI should be a thing, and any new technology, it should be a thing to
hmm
reduce friction in your life.
hmm
So it should do your taxes, it should do
Right.
your
It should
scheduling.
help you plan your vacation.
Right. But I
hmm
think where it goes awry with people is and I wrote about this recently in a LinkedIn
hmm
post titled Digital Wabi Sabi. And Wabi Sabi is a Japanese concept,
hmm
WABI,
hmm
SABI, of that ties into the aesthetics of the imperfect and the
hmm
idea of
hmm
impermanence.
hmm
And these are very human
hmm
attributes. So the reason why Japanese aesthetics is interesting there is that instead of the perfection of
hmm
the like a ceramic cup, they like
hmm
the one that's semi-glazed and a little
hmm
bit imperfection
hmm
pushed into
hmm
it because it shows a uniqueness of that experience. And what's happening now, I think, is that you're going to have such a ability to make things perfect and replicable that it's going to be the humanity that's put into a thing that makes it much more desirable. Ultimately, there's going to be the idea that the human who made a painting that was made with oil paint is specifically a one event, one experience
hmm
thing
hmm
versus a mid-journey, kind
Right.
of. So I feel that that's going to be more of like
hmm
the tendency at some point,
hmm
because as an example, I've spoken about this before, but when the drum machine was really introduced, like Kraftwerk back in the
hmm
70s was using technology early. That was adopted into hip hop as
hmm
a drum beat and a sample that
Right.
then the organic voice of the human being was put
hmm
on top of that, right?
hmm
And then ultimately that was turned into synth pop back in the 80s,
Mhm.
the new wave movement, the post new
Mhm.
wave. But then there was a reaction in the 90s with the grunge movement of going
Mhm.
back to like analog, almost
Right.
60s level
Mhm.
guitars and
Mhm.
drums,
Mhm.
with bands like Pearl
Mhm.
Jam and Alice in Chains, etc. So I think we're always going to have this kind
Mhm.
of like immediate peak of a use
Mhm.
of a thing, and then it'll find its level,
Right.
within your
Mhm.
life. And then you'll
Mhm.
then have the opportunity to say, I'm going to use it or not
Mhm.
use it. But for me, what's interesting is like, can I use technology in a way that maintains the humanity of it,
Right.
like
Right.
your
Mhm.
humanity? So
Mhm.
that's the philosophical area that I'm pushing into,
Mhm. I love
Um,
it. And I love this discussion about AI. I use it every day,
mhm.
and I use Chat GPT for the most part. And it's funny because I'm part of an AI mastermind group,
Mm,
and they're so far above me. I mean,
yeah.
but I also, and we have online meetings once a month, and they're presenting the latest and greatest, right? And frequently I'm like, okay, but I don't need that. That's
Right.
really cool, but and I think we're going to see what we've seen with everything else. Like you said, we've got the basically the four big guys. The four big guys are going to go, ooh, we like that feature of that little bitty startup. We're just going to
Hmm.
buy it.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I mean, Microsoft bought LinkedIn.
Yes.
It's the same concept, and so then we're going to come back down to, as you said, the people who can really do it more. I have found with AI, it is, like I said, I use it every day. One of the things that partially it's made me lazy,
Hmm.
because I could do whatever it is, but it's like, well, why don't I just have AI do it? And then I go in and I edit and I make changes and things like that. Every once in a while, it's like, oh, I like that. I'm not going to make any changes. But it's also freeing me up to do other things. Maybe that other thing is take a nap. Maybe it's work on another project. Whatever it
Hmm.
is, I'm not spending 2 hours writing a blog post. I'm spending, a minute writing the initial prompt, then reviewing it, then uploading it, and gee, I'm done in 15 minutes. And of course, as AI gets better and learns, which that is kind of a little scary thing, then that time is shortened. Like mine will ask me, do you want us to make it sparkly like usual? And I love that it figured out that I kind of like, sparkly and, things like that. But I will also tell them, okay, this is a post that I'm writing for LinkedIn. Therefore, it must be more professional. and
Right.
and so it does that. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on how people are using AI in the creative process, as in graphic design,
Hmm.
script writing, all of those things, because that it has been a big concern. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. You're in LA, the two biggest places for video, or TV movie production, all of those various
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that?
I think we're in this weird space right now where people are outsourcing their creativity
Mm-hmm.
a little too much.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think if you work on an essay, then you ask, ChatGPT, analyze this and see what you
Mm-hmm.
think, I could do better. That's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what it'll often do is rewrite your whole essay.
Right.
But
And then you're
the
like,
whole,
well, it wasn't that bad.
no, and also the whole point of creative writing
Mm-hmm.
is not is again putting that essence of you into
Mm-hmm.
it.
Right.
And the problem is when you stop doing this, you stop remembering how to write.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And
You get lazy. Mm-hmm.
well, you get lazy. And there's actually been a study, I don't remember the study right now, but there is a
Mm-hmm.
study that talks about brain scans of people who are using ChatGPT in that way,
Ah,
that ultimately their brain activity is reduced heavily.
okay. That makes
And
sense. Right.
and the problem is there's no recollection of
Mm-hmm.
what those blog posts you quote
Mm-hmm.
wrote with
Right.
ChatGPT.
Yeah.
You
Five
didn't,
minutes after I post it, whoop, it's gone.
yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, so the weird thing is, then we'll ultimately have facsimiles of Deb
Mm-hmm.
and John being
Mm-hmm.
posted out there. So AI is looking at AI to an
Mm-hmm.
extent where some humans are
Right.
looking at it, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's the idea of doing digital cloning
Mm-hmm.
as well, which is a
Mm-hmm.
thing, which, if you are a famous person and you get digitally cloned, you
Mm-hmm.
can have your clone for a less expensive
Right.
price.
Mm-hmm.
counsel somebody or mentor
Mhm.
someone.
Mhm.
I'm a little bit concerned about that
Mhm.
in the same
Mhm.
way that even though the horse and buggy trade, making
Mhm.
all that is something which we don't need. We need to have a little bit of that
Mhm.
skill.
Mhm.
And it can get to a point where we're simply prompting our way
Mhm.
through everything. And
Right.
therefore, the core way of not
Mhm.
just the craft of
Mhm.
design or the craft of writing, but the thinking is going to be hampered
Mhm.
ultimately.
Right.
And I think there's got to be a balance between these
Mhm.
two things. So I did see a study recently too that people are moving away from kind of like prompting and outsourcing their
Mhm.
writing
Mhm.
into moving more into a state of like, well,
Mhm.
no, I want to write the initial
Mhm.
thing and do this. It's funny because like my last essay on LinkedIn, I actually hashtagged it not written with AI.
I love it.
With, and I wrote a novel that I've been working on for a while. And
Mhm.
at the end of it, and this is like years ago, I wrote
Mhm.
this was written with no AI. And this
Mhm.
is before ChatGPT came
Mhm.
out.
Mhm.
So, because the idea is, I think people are going to get to a point where they're going to say, like, is there a way to verify that this is human
Mhm.
made?
Right. Yeah, I
You
mean,
know,
like education is one of those that's
yeah.
really concerned about that.
Well, I think education also, this is a good use case for AI.
Mhm.
If you can get a tutor or a mentor who
Mhm.
is an AI enabled
Mhm.
character so that a kid who's at 1 o'clock in the morning
Mhm.
working on something can immediately
Mhm.
contact that mentor, then
Mhm.
great. The,
Right.
the trick is to make sure that the AI information is accurate
Right, because it's
because
pulling from everything.
yeah, I've done it again with
Mhm.
myself. I said, like, people Google themselves. I went into ChatGPT once and said, who's
Mhm.
John S. Couch?
Mhm.
And it came back with John Couch's,
Right.
from
Right.
Apple's
Because
description.
there's probably more out there
Yeah.
about him.
But it was weird. It was mixed with mine too. It was
Ooh.
like this amalgam.
Mhm.
And so you have to be careful if you are using
Mhm.
AI completely that
Mhm.
way. You have to verify it. In the same way, I think that people went totally and like, oh, AI is going to if make my company so efficient, I don't need
Mhm.
people, so I'm going to lay
Mhm.
off a bunch of people.
Mhm.
And then MIT did this study where only
Mhm.
like 5% of the AI integrations are actually
Mhm.
working. So ironically,
Mhm.
then they have to go back and then hire those
Mhm.
people back, or at least part of them,
Mhm.
to really get it to go into, an efficiency that
Mhm.
involves human beings. And the
Mhm.
thing is about AI or any technology is like, why would you want a technology that replaces you? What
Right.
you want is a
Mhm.
technology that enhances you,
Enhances. Yep.
right?
Mhm.
And I think that's where it's going to be an interesting thing in the future because if
Mhm.
you're a large company and you're a CEO of a company, you're trying to get shareholder value by
Mhm.
increasing efficiencies and reducing
Right.
costs. So you look at AI in that way.
Right. Because you're going to have
Yeah.
fewer employees.
Right.
Mhm.
But from a humanistic
Mhm.
perspective, we're doing this for humans.
Mhm.
So I think there needs to be a
Mhm.
balance as to like where
Mhm.
humans are involved in this whole thing as we go through this
Mhm.
transition over time. And
Right.
the same thing, I think, like magazines didn't go away because of the internet.
Mhm.
Books did not go away because
Mhm.
of the internet, because of Kindle.
Mhm.
So I think there's going to be this idea that everything's going to change
Mhm.
completely, and it is
Mhm.
changing. But I think there's going to still be a lot of area for
Mhm.
the old stuff
Mhm.
to work
Right.
alongside the new
Right.
stuff.
I saw a news story this week that Barnes and Noble is opening again physical bookstores, like 30.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, but yeah, and AI, it does remove that human thing. And the issue is, as you said, it can end up sounding the same. On LinkedIn this week, I connected with three financial planners in
Mhm.
totally different companies, totally different parts of the country, everything. I mean, it was, and I immediately got the pitch, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
The we can do better, financial planning for you than what you've currently got. And it was really because by the third one, I thought, wait a minute, they were almost word for word.
Yeah.
And and normally I wouldn't have connected with three people, and so my brain might not have done that, but three of them in one day.
Right.
And then of course I said, well, I'm usually I don't even respond, especially
Mhm.
when they pitch right away, but I thought, let's see what happens. And so I responded, thank you very much, for the offer of a review, but I'm very happy with what I have.
Mhm.
Almost identical responses. So
Yeah.
whatever they were putting it into, whether it was Chat GPT or LinkedIn, has its own little AI version, things like that. And and they were getting a little argumentative, right? Well,
Yeah.
how do you know that we're not going to do something better? Well, I
Hmm.
don't, but and then and it's funny because, I pushed back again, thank you, but no. And then one, I could tell the person responded,
Right. Right.
because it was different tone, different one. Now I'm still going to tell her no, but at least, but I think that's where, especially as a company, a business, we need to be very careful
Hmm.
because, we as individuals have a pretty good, we can discriminate pretty quickly when we're talking to a computer or not. And we've seen that so much with people who they go to a website, the chat box pops up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I love getting the AI confused. I mean, that's one of my
Mhm.
goals is to ask it something that is totally off the wall. Now, if I'm looking for a simple answer, I don't need to interact with a human being. But if
Sure.
I need a better answer, then I need it to be a human being. It's kind of like, when you call somebody and you get lost in their voicemail hell, right? And all
Yeah.
you're doing is yelling at the phone saying, person,
Yeah.
person. Um, and of course, then what happens is we go to the next company.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. This is a new evolution of the same
Mhm.
problem that we had with email spam,
Right. Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And most of that was templated.
Hmm.
It was a human being typing into
Hmm.
a template, but basically
Hmm.
shooting it out, and
Hmm.
then you would
Right. Cut,
get this.
paste, cut, paste, cut, paste. Right.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. But this is a new version of
Hmm.
that. The difference is that now there's more of a simulation of a human
Hmm.
being more than ever
Hmm.
before. And yeah, and I think machines so far don't
Hmm.
know how to deal with a Deb or a John when
Hmm.
we're having a personal
Hmm.
like response to
Hmm.
it. And I've actually asked, things before. I said, "Are you AI?" And he goes, "Yes, I am AI." And I'm like, "Well, then
Okay.
give
Hmm.
me that's great. Give me a
Hmm.
human, please."
Hmm.
Ultimately, I still want to have a human
Hmm.
connection. And I think
Hmm.
the danger right now with technology in general, not
Hmm.
just AI, is that humans are community-based animals. We
Hmm.
are social
Hmm.
animals.
Right.
We need to be in a physical proximity to
Hmm.
another human being
Hmm.
because communication is primarily
Hmm.
beyond words,
Hmm.
and
Right.
what's happening is AI and technology, and just
Hmm.
in general, starting with COVID, have really
Hmm.
separated us, and it's
Hmm.
caused a huge amount of
Hmm.
loneliness
Hmm.
and anxiety
Right.
in people. And on some level, you even see cases where AI is being used
Hmm.
as therapy, which is a
Hmm.
dangerous thing.
Hmm.
There was a
Right.
16-year-old boy who killed himself,
Right.
and
Hmm.
because he had developed this relationship with his AI
Hmm.
agent that essentially was like,
Hmm.
"I am the only one who understands you, and
Hmm.
here's how you should do
Hmm.
it." So I know those are not common, but it's
Hmm.
dangerous. You need to have these
Hmm.
guardrails. And when you have an environment of just like growth at
Hmm.
no consideration for the
Hmm.
human element, then we have a problem. But again,
Hmm.
I'm a huge believer in the human spirit to
Hmm.
get to a point of going, okay, we need to like do something here.
Hmm.
I think there's a point, a tipping point that I've
Hmm.
seen in my life
Hmm.
where like everything seems like it's going to hell, and then
Hmm.
ultimately there's this resolution,
Right. Hmm.
ultimately like,
Hmm.
okay, but we
Hmm.
have to go through the worst of it
Hmm.
sometimes to get
Right.
to it.
Right.
So for
Hmm.
example, we have, fires in LA,
Hmm.
in Southern California.
Hmm.
I had to evacuate in January because of
Hmm.
the fires.
Hmm.
But out of that, they're developing new climate change technology.
Hmm.
For
Right.
example,
Hmm.
firefighting drones with
Hmm.
AI, so they can
Hmm.
immediately go in the
Hmm.
night and see where there's embers
Hmm.
underground.
Right. Are there hot
And
spots?
so
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
exactly. So I think
Hmm.
there's ways where out of the tragedy that we're
Hmm.
doing on some
Hmm.
level, humans are doing, there
Hmm.
is also a technological solution to it that we often don't hear
Right.
about as much
Hmm.
because fear sells much more than
Hmm.
anything else. And so there's an immediate kind
Hmm.
of, appeal to the
Hmm.
amygdala. And then what
Hmm.
happens is that if we're all in a state of fear, then we can't think creatively.
Hmm.
We can't think
Right.
expansively.
Hmm.
And right now, if you look at the news and
Hmm.
you look at what's happening in the
Oi.
world, you
Oi.
immediately go
Hmm.
into what a
Hmm.
constricted state of
Hmm.
fear, right?
Hmm.
So that is a way for people to be easily swayed
Hmm.
by, not to be
Hmm.
conspiratorial, but by large governments, by,
Hmm.
by large companies, by bad actors.
Hmm.
And the trick is, and the reason why I
Hmm.
wrote my book about the art of creative
Hmm.
rebellion is to not be a contrarian, but look at whatever you're
Hmm.
seeing and then ask yourself, is it
Hmm.
true?
Right.
You
Right.
know, and
Yeah.
where's the source on
Hmm.
this?
Hmm.
And is the fear I'm feeling from that true
Hmm.
too?
Right.
You know, or is it just a
Hmm.
reaction?
Right. And yeah, people do, and we've always done the thing where, fear kind of sells.
Hmm.
It's funny, just last night I was watching a documentary on FDR, who, of
Hmm.
course, one of his most famous quotes was,
Yes.
the only thing to fear is fear itself.
Yes.
And it was but we do that. I mean, like, I'm a marketing person.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that we are taught is you want to solve somebody's pain,
Yes.
which means you're going to make them think of that pain.
Yeah.
And I tell people, I don't want to do that. I want to help
Mm.
you feel pleasure.
Right.
And boy, do I get pushback on some of those. And they're two sides of the same coin, right?
Sure. Right.
But yeah, it's, why do we have to make people think negative? Back to, AI writing scripts and screenplays. That was the biggest argument that was coming out, was it can do, AI can 100% write a screenplay. Well,
Hmm.
yeah, it probably can, but is it any good?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where that comes back in.
Well, it comes down to like the idea that when I'm looking at something, I'm not just looking at it from the perspective of like it's just great art. I'm looking at it
Mm-hmm.
from the story.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that I can tell a Tarantino film from a M. Night Shyamalan
Right.
film
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
from I don't know, a Wes Anderson film is
Mm-hmm.
because there's a specificity
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of point of view creatively
Right.
that's coming through.
Mm-hmm.
And even if there was the perfect imitation, I don't know, VO in the future doing
Mm-hmm.
an AI version of a Wes Anderson film, which you
Mm-hmm.
could easily do because of the visual
Mm-hmm.
affectations, it wouldn't feel the same to me.
Right. Right.
In the same way that there was a huge reaction from, I forget the name of that, a fake band that was on Spotify,
Oh yeah.
like
Mm-hmm.
basically an amalgam of 70s
Mm-hmm.
bands, into this thing. And
Mm-hmm.
and that, on one level you could say, well,
Mm-hmm.
music's music.
Mm-hmm.
But I would argue that music, at least traditionally, has been a connection to the
Mm-hmm.
artist, even
Mm-hmm.
DJs
Right.
that, who are
Mm-hmm.
just remixing
Mm-hmm.
things. There's still a human
Mm-hmm.
connection to that
Mm-hmm.
story. I think part of the power of Billie Eilish or
Mm-hmm.
Taylor
Mm-hmm.
Swift, or
Mm-hmm.
Beyonce is the connection to them as
Right.
people
Mm-hmm.
more than just
Mm-hmm.
the fact that they're
Mm-hmm.
making
Mm-hmm.
songs, because it's their stories that you're hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that a human being who has a
Mm-hmm.
limited shelf life in this world is expressing their
Mm-hmm.
truths. And if AI, which is, permanent
Mm-hmm.
and is emulating those
Mm-hmm.
emotions, it just feels different at
Right.
this
Right.
point.
Yeah. I'm a Star Trek fan. Now, I'm not a Trekkie. I don't go to conventions. I
Mhm.
don't know any of that. But I remember one of the episodes of Next Generation where Data, the android,
Yep.
was performing a violin concerto.
Yeah.
And afterwards, they all said, "Oh my gosh, that was wonderful." And he did not like them saying that. And
Mm.
well, why? And he said, "It was perfect." And they
Yes.
said, "Well, yeah, that's why we liked it."
Exactly
And
right.
he said, "It's the imperfections that make it better. It's that wrong note. It's
Yeah.
that brush stroke that is, you're like, whoa, but it's that imperfection that comes from the human. Now, I don't know, maybe at some point computers will be able to do this, but it is those, big little imperfections that, make us go, oh, okay. Taylor
Yeah.
Swift concert. I'm not a Swiftie either, but if they, I went to, now here, this is really going to show my age, a Jim Brinkman concert, right? He's a pianist.
Mhm.
And after the performance, he got up, he was running off, he tripped, he fell,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and woo, across that, and he came back because, of course, everybody was very concerned, and he played more music, to basically to show everybody he was okay. But we like that humanism, that authenticity of those mistakes. And
Yes.
and
I
I
mean,
think that's the thing that we need to remember is we can't be perfect. And if we want to be perfect, we're never going to get there because we are humans.
Right. And that's something that, I pointed out in the concept of wabi
Hmm.
sabi. It's the
Hmm.
imperfection.
Hmm.
Uh, when Glenn Gould plays Bach and he's
Hmm.
breathing over the piano,
Hmm.
like the
Hmm.
mic's picking it up, that's
Hmm.
part of it.
Right, right.
When,
Hmm.
when Miles Davis takes a breath in the
Hmm.
middle of what he's doing and
Hmm.
then purposely like hits the next note,
Hmm.
that's his spirit
Hmm.
coming
Hmm.
through it. And you're right, at some
Hmm.
point, there could be a situation
Hmm.
where AI can even emulate that. But what's
Hmm.
the point of
Hmm.
that ultimately?
Hmm.
Why, you know, it's because you can do it fine. But I
Hmm.
think that humans will go, okay, well, that's fine. I'm not interested
Hmm.
in that. And because a lot of young people that I talk to are having this negative reaction to AI slop.
Hmm.
And they immediately
Hmm.
can kind of go, is this really a video made for
Right.
me by this
Hmm.
person or
Hmm.
not? Because it
Hmm.
feels off.
Hmm.
And I think, deep fakes are going to be a
Hmm.
problem, but I think there's going to be a whole industry of AI detecting AI,
Right. Yeah. And that's
being more,
okay. I need to
yeah,
know that this person didn't say that.
right. Because it's very dangerous. We're in
Hmm.
this perfect storm
Hmm.
right now of like, it used to be, quote, fake news and
Hmm.
misinformation and
Hmm.
all this, which is being made more and more.
Hmm.
Questionable because
Hmm.
of the fact that AI has gotten so
Hmm.
good at
Hmm.
emulating reality.
Hmm.
So the question, what's interesting to me is like, how do we validate humanity
Hmm.
within all this?
Hmm.
How do we know that this is certified human,
Hmm.
whatever it is we're
Hmm.
doing? And we're right in the middle of it. Like,
Right.
you
Hmm.
think about it, 2 years ago, people didn't know what ChatGPT was at all,
No. And it's
right?
incredible the changes that it has made.
Right. And, we're in this very different political environment, very
Hmm.
different, you know,
Hmm.
climate crisis in
Hmm.
addition to this incredible rise in AI and then
Hmm.
businesses, shuffling
Hmm.
and laying off people and then hiring people. And then it's just a very
Hmm.
dynamic time.
Hmm.
So the question is like, how do you stay centered in the midst
Hmm.
of all this?
Hmm.
Well, number one, for me, control what you can control.
Right.
Yeah.
Put
And so
your phone down.
put it down. And then if there's something that's
Hmm.
bothering you, write it down.
Hmm.
Think of one thing that you can do
Hmm.
to positively address that issue.
Right.
It can be the
Right.
tiniest thing possible.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter.
Hmm.
But if you can write down your
Hmm.
concerns, you can
Hmm.
get out of paralysis because the moment
Hmm.
you start taking action,
Right.
you do better, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I think you have to have this crazy
Hmm.
belief in something
Hmm.
without any proof of evidence
Hmm.
first in order to get anything,
Right. Hmm.
because kids do this all the time.
Hmm.
They to use an overly used word right now, manifest things
Hmm.
primarily through the complete and utter belief that they're going to get a red bicycle,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
then in part of that is them controlling the parents, part of them is like
Right.
them
Pointing out every red
working.
bicycle they see, all those
Right,
things.
but
Hmm.
they're open, right? So
Hmm.
they're open to that
Hmm.
possibility,
Hmm.
and therefore the probability of that thing
Hmm.
happening is increased.
Hmm.
And I think the same thing has to happen in terms of like your own work and your creativity,
Hmm.
is you have to believe it's going to get better because we're being
Hmm.
programmed right now to believe everything is going to go wrong. So the
Hmm.
trick is like
Hmm.
you acknowledge reality and say,
Hmm.
yeah, this is the reality of the world.
Right.
But if you stay in that
Hmm.
vibrational energy of
Hmm.
it, then you're just going to get depressed.
Hmm.
So it's better to kind of go, this is my Zen
Hmm.
stoicism thinking, like,
Hmm.
acknowledge the reality of a
Hmm.
thing, really, really acknowledge it, like,
Hmm.
and then eat the frog, like
Hmm.
this is the way things are.
Hmm.
And then you realize, oh, the frog is not that bad.
Right.
There's ways to work through
Tastes
it.
like chicken.
Right, right,
Hmm.
exactly. So
Hmm.
once you move through that, then you
Hmm.
can start to then open up your creative center
Right.
and then think, well, out of curiosity,
Hmm.
how would I approach this?
Hmm.
Like almost as an experiment.
Hmm.
So it's sort of like going, oh my God, the job market's hard. I can't find
Hmm.
anything. Well, as an experiment,
Hmm.
what if I were to approach these different industries? How
Hmm.
would I do that?
Right.
As
Hmm.
and the idea of saying as an experiment also allows you to have a little bit of
Hmm.
distance on
Hmm.
the whole thing
Right.
and
And
allows
know
you
that it might not work out the way you intended.
exactly.
Hmm.
And so the more that you can kind of do that, I think not just with job search, but
Hmm.
anything in
Hmm.
life, that instead of being afraid of
Hmm.
something, acknowledge the
Hmm.
fear, but then go
Hmm.
like, well, now I'm going to be curious about the
Right.
fear.
Right.
Like, why is this bothering
Hmm.
me?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important to not bury our heads in the sand.
Yes.
I talk to people now, they have changed their mind, that I will never use AI.
Right.
Well, now they use it. Or, the people who don't watch the news. They don't want to know. I don't watch the news. I get little I know what's going on in the world, but I'm not going to be consumed by it. And it was interesting when my mother was alive. She was a huge Fox News watcher. I mean, she had Fox News on all the time. And Fox News has a more conservative bent. There are also
Sure.
people who love the other ones on the other side, but she watched it all the time. And the funny thing was, we noticed she was getting grumpier and
Hmm.
grumpier.
Hmm.
And she was also getting older, and so all of these things. But on her own, and this was the thing that I really found interesting, she realized that she needed to stop that. And so she put herself on kind of a diet of
Hmm.
news, right? And so she would she watched the local news first thing. What's my weather? Yada yada yada. She watched the local news at noon. What was going on? Then she would watch 1 hour of Fox, and of course, I kept telling her 1 hour is all you need because they just repeat everything over and over for any of the major networks. I
Right.
mean, there's not
Right.
that much going on in the world. They do have to repeat. But then the other thing that she did was, so that was 3-ish hours. She had the Hallmark Channel on,
Hmm.
and it was amazing how her disposition changed. And of course, the funny thing was she could fall asleep watching a Hallmark movie, wake up during another one, and boy still got girl and love prevailed, right?
Right. Right.
Whatever it was. But just removing that, that negativity, and it's not just Fox, it's all of them. Just removing that from her world made a big difference. She was not able to get out and about very
Well,
much and see people, but it
it's,
was
it's
it was amazing that it did that.
when I was at Hulu, I went down to the customer service,
Mm-hmm.
center to see uh, how they had to deal with, people
Mm-hmm.
incoming calls,
Right.
complaining about things. But then I also showed a giant screen which showed all the live TV, and
Mm-hmm.
it was done by color, so you can kind of
Mm-hmm.
see. So at the very top, the
Mm-hmm.
most watched was this giant red band, and it was actually Fox.
Mm-hmm.
Fox News. And then below that was like CNN,
Mm-hmm.
MSNBC were much smaller
Mm-hmm.
bands. But the thing was interesting is like I'm like, why is it on? Why is this such a high
Mm-hmm.
amount of streaming or live video?
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that especially older people, it doesn't matter if you're on the left or
Mm-hmm.
right, they turn on the TV as a way to have companionship.
Right. That was my mom. It was some noise that
Yeah,
was going on. Somebody was
exactly.
kind of talking to her.
And
Mm-hmm.
whether it's, left-leaning
Mm-hmm.
MSNBC or
Right.
right-leaning
Mm-hmm.
Fox, what happens is you're subconsciously being
Mm-hmm.
inundated with
Mm-hmm.
information, which I
Right.
don't think human beings
Mm-hmm.
are meant to have a continuous flow
Right. Mm-hmm.
of information,
Mm-hmm.
whatever point of the political
Mm-hmm.
spectrum it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that we've lost, and especially in the
Mm-hmm.
age, since one of the
Mm-hmm.
negative things, so to speak, of the internet was the inability to just turn off
Right.
everything, and
Remember
go
when, like at
outside.
midnight, they used to go to nothing?
Well, they'd go to
They
like
played
the
the national
signal, right?
anthem, and then you
Yeah,
had,
right,
you know.
exactly. But now it's just a continuous
Mm-hmm.
thing, so that
Mm-hmm.
people are looking for dopamine
Right. Mm-hmm.
release, whether it's on the phone or
Mm-hmm.
TV.
Mm-hmm.
And, books are down in readership, but at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, I think there's been a huge upsurge in the last year overall, like an
Mm-hmm.
interest in books and small
Mm-hmm.
bookstores.
Right.
Because the difference
Albums. People are buying physical
albums,
albums,
but
right?
the thing about books as an example is
Mm-hmm.
it's a creative act of reading.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're reading
Yes.
something, you're
Mm-hmm.
you're turning squiggly little
Mm-hmm.
lines into visuals and meaning in
Right.
your
Yeah.
head.
You're putting, you're seeing
You're
whatever
creatively
you're reading
involved.
about. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. You're making a movie.
Mm-hmm.
When you're watching a movie, less so.
Mm-hmm.
You're still involved, and
Mm-hmm.
then you have the ability to sit through a 2-hour film,
Mm-hmm.
which nowadays is, without pulling out your phone,
Mm-hmm.
you are immersed in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the ability to focus well
Mm-hmm.
is something that's going to probably come back
Mm-hmm.
more and more. But if you're in a constant state of needing stimulation,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's your mom,
Mm-hmm.
with continuously having TV on in the
Mm-hmm.
background, or a teenager needing their
Mm-hmm.
phone, or even a middle-aged person
Right.
needing their phone, it puts you into a state of not being present
Mm-hmm.
in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, you are in a state of low-grade anxiety
Mm-hmm.
probably most of the time,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's like you watch what you eat,
Mm-hmm.
right? You watch the
Mm-hmm.
kind of food that you eat. You
Mm-hmm.
need to watch the kind of information
Mm-hmm.
you're taking in
Right.
and
Mm-hmm.
whether it's good for you or
Mm-hmm.
not.
Right.
And I think it's all media. I think it's
Hmm.
books. I'm not saying censor yourself, like look at things, but
Hmm.
then if it's not for you, then don't. Like if you're
Hmm.
not into horror films or
Right.
horror
Don't
books,
watch it.
don't
Hmm.
watch it, right?
Hmm.
Because it can affect you in a
Hmm.
way. And other people are like, oh, I'm totally fine. It actually helps me deal with the
Hmm.
world. But th whatever it is for your diet,
Hmm.
information wise,
Hmm.
be cognizant
Hmm.
that whatever you're putting in there, you're feeding
Hmm.
into your subconscious and you're giving a
Hmm.
lens to the world.
Hmm.
So my hope ultimately is that we start to look at the world in terms of solutions,
Hmm.
creative solutions.
Hmm.
Yes, there's challenges, but what's
Hmm.
great about being a human
Hmm.
is that we were able to think about
Hmm.
things in ways that even machines can't. And
Right.
there's
Hmm.
just been an example. I wish I could remember who said this, but someone said that, if you had looked at Galileo's time and AI had existed, all the books would have said that the Earth was the center of the universe,
Hmm.
that there was just, and
Right. Hmm.
it took him
Hmm.
going against all
Hmm.
received knowledge
Hmm.
to say that's not true.
Hmm.
So the current state of LLMs is essentially looking
Hmm.
backwards. And what's going to happen over time is humans will be, for the moment, at
Hmm.
the forefront of combining things
Hmm.
that, whoa, should not happen,
Hmm.
like should not be able to
Hmm.
exist together. Now, when you get to a point, I think ultimately of AI becoming super intelligent, we'll have a different
Hmm.
situation that's going to happen at that point.
Hmm.
But what's interesting about the whole AI thing and technology in general, it comes down to like, what's the point of being human?
Hmm.
Like, what
Hmm.
is the value? We have consciousness.
Hmm.
We have a very specific kind of consciousness,
Hmm.
which is put into our
Hmm.
our brain as a receiver of that consciousness, or it's the maker of that consciousness, depending on which
Right.
school that
And
you go
there's,
to. Right,
learned environmental, all of those things.
right,
But yeah, we
right.
are unique.
We are unique, and I
Hmm.
think what makes us unique also is the probability of you being here is just so
Hmm.
exponentially low. What
Hmm.
would take stepping away from religion or spiritual thinking
Hmm.
for a moment, it's just really low,
Hmm.
almost zero chance. And then you have infinity that came before you, and infinity is going to come after you
Hmm.
leave. So what you do as a
Hmm.
human being
Hmm.
in this moment, because we have an expiration date,
Hmm.
is very important, and that's where
Right.
meaning comes into the
Hmm.
whole equation, I think.
Hmm.
And a machine can emulate thinking and consciousness,
Hmm.
but it doesn't have
Hmm.
that feeling of like the preciousness of
Right.
existence right
Hmm.
now. Now,
Hmm.
it may at some point.
Hmm.
At this point, it doesn't.
Right. Right. And that's pretty
So
much kind of what led
that's
you
I think
to.
that's the reason
Mhm.
why. What am I? What,
Oh, go ahead. Hmm.
yeah, I'm sorry. I would say like that's kind of like the reason why uh, the scene in Blade Runner, the original one, where the replicant
Hmm.
uh, ends up dying and
Hmm.
allows Harrison Ford to
Hmm.
live is so poignant.
Hmm.
This is a synthetic human
Hmm.
being who came back to Earth to try to meet his maker in order to
Hmm.
get an extension on life,
Hmm.
and that couldn't happen.
Hmm.
So, there's this interesting kind of idea that, well,
Hmm.
what if human beings do
Hmm.
are not the only ones who have the ability to feel and have
Hmm.
consciousness?
Hmm.
And what if we do get to the point where machines do have that? And that's the
Hmm.
idea of the singularity as well,
Hmm.
that there'll be a point, according to Ray Kurzweil, where there's kind of a combination, that we will have a connection between machines and humanity at the
Hmm.
same time.
Right.
So, all this sounds like science fiction, but the
Hmm.
crazy thing is that what ChatGPT and others are doing right now seemed very much like
Right.
science
Oh yeah.
fiction.
6 years ago, we would have
Yeah,
thought, no, this is not possible.
yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that's the amazing thing. But the other thing is that machines
Hmm.
cannot be creative, right? They can
Right.
create something, but they're only creating from what they have already.
Hmm.
And so I love your book. It's The Art of Creative Rebellion, a survival
Hmm.
guide for the creative rebel. So tell us about why you wrote that.
Well, the interesting thing about the book itself is that it came out of um, a speech I gave at South by Southwest
Mm-hmm.
after launching the new design of Hulu.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a really big ballroom, and there was a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people that came in to hear it. And it was based essentially on a subreddit that came out after I launched a new design that was called "I Hate Your Effing Design," but it didn't say
Mm-hmm.
effing.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that's an interesting way
Mm-hmm.
to kind of like talk about
Mm-hmm.
the creative courage that's required to put something new out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to do something at scale where it's because of you that it exists, you
Right.
and so I also had like, the head of design
Mm-hmm.
for Twitter, the head of design for Instagram on the panel with me
Mm-hmm.
to talk about this feeling of isolation you often have when you're doing something that is against the paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
So after that speech, there was a lot of people that came up and said, like, do you have a book? Would you recommend books to
Mm-hmm.
me? My wife was next to me and she said, you should write the book that you wish you had had
Right.
when
Mm-hmm.
you were coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So the original conceit of the book was to be kind of like Letters to a Young Poet by
Ah.
Rilke.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that if you really want to do creative work, this is what
Mm-hmm.
it's going to require. And it kind of turned into more of a kitchen confidential,
Mm-hmm.
feeling of like this is what happens in the kitchens that Bourdain talked
Mm-hmm.
about. But the idea is you have these large companies that you work for. So how does one maintain their creative, innovative spirit and
Mm-hmm.
thinking within the context of a large
Mm-hmm.
company? Because a large company will hire you because of your ability to do extraordinary
Mm-hmm.
things. But then they have a specific need for you to
Right.
do
And they
one
don't
thing.
want you to branch out.
Right, because from their perspective, it could be chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, they bemoan not having that internally, and they often will
Mm-hmm.
hire external
Mm-hmm.
people, consultants like me,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of point out the obvious
Mm-hmm.
that this is things that they already know,
Mm-hmm.
but they should be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do is I will work with an internal team
Mm-hmm.
and then give them the book. Often we'll
Mm-hmm.
speak about the book as well, or they buy the book rather.
Mm-hmm.
And then we develop a strategy. And so it's working with the team internally and working with,
Mm-hmm.
from an external point of view on
Mm-hmm.
this. But the interesting thing about the idea of rebellion is it's a very American mentality of
Mm-hmm.
the ability to question the
Right.
status quo
Mm-hmm.
and say there's a better way to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most powerful things to think about the American spirit is to not just say, I'm going to take it,
Mm-hmm.
that the ability to speak openly, our First Amendment rights
Mm-hmm.
to
Right.
have the
Right.
ability to, whether you're on the whatever part of the spectrum you're on,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's incredibly important, especially in this day
Mm-hmm.
and time, that all people have the ability to speak their
Mm-hmm.
truth,
Right.
and without me having my opinion
Mm-hmm.
suppressing yours, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
on religion or
Mm-hmm.
politics or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of the things that I think that one of the many things that make America such a powerful
Mm-hmm.
and symbolic force in the
Mm-hmm.
world. I'm not saying it's better than other countries. I'm just saying that's one of the
Mm-hmm.
attributes
Mm-hmm.
that I think that I admire the
Mm-hmm.
most. So in some ways, my book was an homage, to the idea that yes, let's look at the rules, let's go by them. But
Mm-hmm.
if there are things that feel wrong,
Mm-hmm.
you either need to point them out, try
Mm-hmm.
to make change, or in a case of a company, you may have to leave.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
Right.
entirely, because
Mm-hmm.
it's if their culture is not your culture, then
Mm-hmm.
that's what you are in the minority going to their
Right.
larger
You're not going to
thing.
do your best work
No, and
if you're
they're
in
not going
that
to want to.
situation.
Exactly. But I think there's a way that we can kind of strip away all of the issues of being political and what
Mm-hmm.
spectrum is. I remember there's a philosopher named Baruch Spinoza
Mm-hmm.
back 400 years ago who said if you want to find a way to communicate with someone who has a differing opinion to
Mm-hmm.
you, is find what you have in common.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're a
Right.
parent,
Mm-hmm.
their parent, if you have an interest in some subject and they
Mm-hmm.
do too, you like golf, I like golf,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak, those are the areas that you
Mm-hmm.
want to find. Because then what you
Mm-hmm.
do is you find your common humanity
Mm-hmm.
again.
Right.
And then you can see beyond, well,
Mm-hmm.
I can see like why you see that way. I can
Mm-hmm.
see why you think that
Right.
way.
I don't
And-
agree with it, but I can see
right.
why you feel that way.
But it's
Mm-hmm.
not being demonizing. And
Mm-hmm.
I think what happens is that human beings, because we're tribal
Mm-hmm.
by nature,
Right.
going back, to our
Mm-hmm.
ancestors, will tend to immediately say good, bad,
Mm-hmm.
on these
Right.
things. And it's so much
Or
more
to say, "Ooh, I have to think the same way."
right. And well, there's the whole issue of conformity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important that we don't have conformity. And that's
Mm-hmm.
again the other great thing
Mm-hmm.
about the melting pot of America is that
Mm-hmm.
everybody who came here was rebelling from their
Right.
background, and
Mm-hmm.
there were different countries and
Mm-hmm.
different beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that we've had this amazing experiment where we all can
Mm-hmm.
get together and then amplify each other, I
Mm-hmm.
think is the important thing. So when I run design departments for product design or product,
Mm-hmm.
it's really important to me that there is diversity in the group,
Right.
not just because it's politically correct, but it's because they reflect the audience that I'm designing
Right.
for,
Right.
right?
hmm
And I can only see through my very limited
hmm
spectrum,
hmm
of being a heterosexual male of a certain
hmm
age,
hmm
whereas they can show me at the age of 18 of being a non-binary
hmm
person
Right.
of
hmm
color who
hmm
sees the world in a very different way.
hmm
And I think that makes it amazing,
hmm
right?
hmm
And I think that that feeling of tolerance and that
hmm
feeling of compassion
hmm
is what we have naturally
hmm
for people that we like and around us. We
hmm
just need to expand that circle.
Right. Right. And recognize that, we want to have somebody give that to us, so we should be giving it back.
Yes.
But I think it is so important for us to know that being creative, and being having the ability to be free to be creative,
Yeah.
that's how we're authentic. Like I said, if we're going, ooh, I have to go along with whatever this is, now let's be honest. I mean, sometimes we do have to go with the flow,
Sure. Sure. Sure.
but for whatever reason. But then, as you said, you analyze that. Okay, why am I doing that? Can
Mhm.
I maybe change how they're doing? Or am I going to remove myself from it? Things like that. And I think, the biggest thing is we have to keep using our minds. And we've gotten away from doing that. We
Yeah.
have gone with the, oh, well, this is what everybody on Facebook is saying, or that
Mhm.
TV program, or that newscaster, that person.
Sure.
Yes, there are times where there's a fear of retribution. I mean, if my boss were to tell me you need to do this, okay, I need to do that, or there could be an issue, right?
Mhm.
But it's using our minds to say, wait a minute, what's going on here?
I think you hit on, the much overused word, but it's meaningful. It's authentic.
hmm
And I think in a company environment that if you are authentically you, especially
hmm
from like the get-go,
hmm hmm
they know what they're getting with you.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and they want that.
hmm
The worst thing you can do is become a kind of a drone,
hmm
within the
hmm
organization. It's not good for the organization. It's not good
Right.
for you.
hmm
It's more of a keep my head down
hmm
stance.
hmm
Now, the thing is, if you are authentically yourself, you have to be okay with the possibility that you might get fired for
hmm
being yourself.
Right. hmm
But I have found personally that it almost never happens,
hmm
that it is the people who are truly themselves,
hmm
that truly speak
hmm
truthfully about
hmm
what needs to be done, and they
hmm
work hard
hmm
at getting that done with
hmm
a certain amount of joy,
hmm
like in what they're doing. They
hmm
tend to be the ones who succeed really
hmm
well. The ones who complain all the time but are
hmm
just kind of doing their job,
hmm
they're going to be thought of as being people, even subconsciously, who may
hmm
not be the best people to be having
Right.
the team,
hmm
right?
hmm
So I think yes, there's a certain company culture you go
hmm
into, and of course, that's just every company has that.
hmm
You can still be an
hmm
individual and a group of people,
Right.
and I think that's key.
hmm
You know,
Right.
and again, that's
hmm
what I read about in the
hmm
book.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's why we have so many entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah,
We're all going, ooh, I can do it different, better, whatever it is. But we're like, I'm in. And, how many people become entrepreneurs because they don't like working for
sure,
corporations?
sure.
But there are also people who they need that structure. Whatever it is. So again, it's about being authentic.
The thing about working in a company, if you do it correctly, though, is that you can go from an idea to a product
hmm
and you can scale
hmm
enormously.
Right.
And for me
hmm
personally, I like that feeling. The
hmm
one thing that's can be a downside at times of being a consultant is you
hmm
come in, you're used for a bit period of
hmm
time, and then you're gone. And there's
hmm
no feeling
hmm
of completion. For me as a
hmm
creative person, there's a
hmm
huge amount of satisfaction
hmm
of coming in, working with a team of people,
hmm
and then actually launching something into the
hmm
world.
hmm
So it depends like where you are
Right.
in your journey. I
hmm
I I don't subscribe to the idea that, companies are, it depends. The companies work for you or you work for
hmm
them at different stages in your life. And if
hmm
you're 25 years old, I would suggest doing a startup.
hmm
Like do it while you have low overhead,
Right.
you have
hmm
fire in the belly,
Yeah. Lots of
and
energy.
lots of energy. I do think it's good to, like, spend
hmm
a little bit of time with a large company. Like if you can intern with a Google
Mhm.
or what have you, then you say, I learned from that.
Right.
You have a passion for something, you
Mhm.
do a startup, and it's a
Mhm.
low downside if it doesn't work out,
Mhm.
but having the experience of working in a large company
Mhm.
as well as your own company and then
Mhm.
maybe a mid-sized company,
Mhm.
then you can find which
Mhm.
porridge is
Mhm.
the right temperature for you,
Right.
so to
Right.
speak.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good old Goldilocks there. So,
exactly.
right. Well, oh my gosh, John, we are at the top of the hour and I feel like we've just scratched the surface on this. So, and obviously things are tumultuous is
Mhm.
maybe the in the world. And so I think it would be good to have you on again to talk about because things will settle. We
Yeah.
might not like how they settle, but they're going to settle. But then that's where we make changes, right? This is just the way that we do. So I would love to have you on again. But and we will have a link to your book in the show notes. But if how do people find you, and what are the services that you provide?
Well, if you go to LinkedIn, you can actually find me pretty easily there.
Mm-hmm,
Again, John S.
mm-hmm,
Couch with an
mm-hmm.
S in the middle. You can also go to john-couch.com,
Okay.
which is my personal website.
Mm-hmm,
You can find me on Instagram at
mm-hmm,
Shadow and Sun Art.
mm-hmm,
That's with, periods in between Shadow and Sun
mm-hmm.
and Art. I think that's pretty much the best way to find me at
Okay.
this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Great. And I encourage folks to
Oh,
get the book.
sorry. One
Mm-hmm.
thing,
Oh,
galvanizedstudios.com. You
yes.
can also go to,
Mm-hmm,
and Galvanized Studios is a consultancy
mm-hmm,
that myself and people I work
mm-hmm,
with will then come in and work within a large
mm-hmm,
company, mid-sized company,
mm-hmm,
everything from strategy to
mm-hmm,
product management to
mm-hmm,
product design
mm-hmm,
to even original
mm-hmm,
content IP creation.
mm-hmm.
So
I
that's,
love it.
yeah.
I love it. Yeah, you can't get much bigger than Amazon.
Yeah, that was a
Right?
great experience. I
Mhm,
enjoyed working with
mhm.
them. Yeah.
Right, right. Well, this has been just a very thought-provoking and very good discussion. I love this. And I hope that people who have been listening or watching are thinking, right? That's what we want to do.
Yeah. So,
Right? Yeah.
yeah. And you can also get my book on
Hmm.
Amazon
Hmm.
too.
Right,
So easy
right.
to find. And
Hmm.
also Barnes and Noble
Hmm.
and probably other places.
Hmm.
So,
Cool. I love
yeah.
it. I love it. Well, until next time, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Yeah, I think the thing that's really been resonant with me for a while is, and I haven't found a really, catchy way to say this yet, but ultimately be kind. I think we all need to be kinder to each other because we're all going through this human experience. And there's a tendency to think in terms of competition and think that in order for me to succeed, you must lose. But in reality, I think in order for me to succeed, you must succeed. And I think the more that we take on the idea that there's plenty for everybody to go around, we're not in a scarcity mindset, that we can then help each other much more through our endeavors, whether they're business or whether they're personal. And I think that's something that has really come full circle for me is that when it comes down to it, people will remember you for your kindness and your humanity more than all the money you made them. So there's
I
that.
I love that. Well, I'm Deb Creer. I've been having such a wonderful discussion with John S. Couch. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.